What you're about to hear aren't ghost stories. These are real situations where something looked human but didn't act like it should. Small details that don't make sense. Movements that shouldn't happen. And by the time you notice something is wrong, it's already too late.
Story 1. My name is Ethan, and I saw him before I understood what was wrong, because the first thing that caught my attention was movement in the snow outside my cabin window, slow and steady, like someone walking directly toward the house. And at first I didn't react, because that by itself wasn't unusual. Sometimes people cross through the area, hikers, or someone who got lost. But what made me stay there watching was how precise it was. No hesitation, no change in direction, just a straight line aimed at me. And I remember thinking, I should be hearing something. The sound of boots pressing into the snow, that dry crunch that carries in cold air. But there was nothing, complete silence. And when I leaned closer to the glass, I focused on the ground behind him. And that was when something didn't match. The snow was completely smooth, untouched. No footprints, no marks. No disturbance of any kind, just a flat white surface where he had already walked. And I stayed there longer than I should have, trying to process it, because he was still moving, still getting closer, but leaving absolutely no trace behind him. And the closer he got, the more details I could see, and none of them made it better. He wasn't dressed for the cold. No jacket, just a thin, dark, long-sleeve shirt. No gloves, no hat, nothing protecting him, and his body wasn't reacting at all. No shivering, no tension, just normal posture. And when he got close enough for me to see his face clearly, I realized he wasn't looking around like someone trying to find a place. His eyes were fixed directly on the window, on me. And the moment I shifted my weight slightly, he stopped instantly, like the movement had triggered something. And we stayed like that for a few seconds, both still, him outside in the snow, me inside, behind the glass. And then he straightened up in a way that didn't feel natural, like he had been slightly bent forward before, and suddenly corrected it in one motion. And it wasn't a stretch or a casual adjustment. It was precise, like he was matching a position instead of moving naturally. And then he tilted his head just a little to the side, without breaking eye contact, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. And that was when I decided I needed to move away from the window, just to check the door, to make sure everything was locked, even though I was almost certain it was. And the moment I stepped back, I heard it. Not from outside, not from him, but from inside the house. A soft shift behind me, like weight transferring on the wooden floor. And I froze immediately, because I had been alone all evening. No footsteps, no doors, nothing, until that exact second. And I turned slowly toward the hallway, expecting to see something, anything, but it was empty, completely dark, nothing out of place. And when I looked back at the window, he was gone, completely gone. No movement, no transition, just not there anymore. And the snow outside was still untouched. No footprints leading away, no marks, nothing to show where he could have gone. And I remember stepping closer again, scanning the area, trying to understand it, because there was nowhere to hide, no cover, no objects nearby, just open ground. And then I saw something I hadn't noticed before, right on the outside of the glass. Faint at first, and then clearer as I adjusted my angle. A smear, like skin had pressed against it. Not a full handprint, just part of it. And it was positioned too high, higher than where his hands would have naturally been, unless he had been standing closer than I thought, closer than the tracks suggested. And I leaned in without thinking, trying to get a better look. And that was when another sound came from inside the house. This time, closer, a slight movement behind me again. And I didn't turn immediately. I stayed looking at the glass because I could see something forming on the inside surface now. a faint fog spreading outward like someone had just breathed against it from my side. And slowly, without any sudden motion, a full handprint appeared from the inside, pressing against the glass exactly where I had been looking. The fingers extending one by one as if they were being placed deliberately. And I didn't move. I couldn't. Because at that point I understood something was already inside with me. Something that had been there before I even noticed him outside. And I could feel it standing behind me, close enough to reach the window without stepping past me. And I knew if I turned around, I wouldn't be alone in that room anymore. And the handprint pressed harder, the glass creaking slightly under the pressure. And right next to it, another mark appeared, slowly forming, not a hand this time, but a forehead leaning against the glass from inside, positioned at the same height as mine, like it was standing directly behind me, matching my posture exactly. And I stayed completely still, trying not to react, trying not to give it any signal that I understood what was happening, because the moment I moved earlier, the one outside had reacted instantly. And now, I was starting to understand that both movements were connected, like one was responding to the other, like whatever was outside had been mirroring me, while whatever was inside had been positioning itself to match me, and I could feel it now. Not touching me, but close enough that the air behind my neck felt slightly different, colder, but not from the outside, more like something blocking the space behind me. And I slowly lowered my hand away from the glass, and the handprint on the inside followed it at the exact same speed, without actually touching me, maintaining the same distance. And that was when I realized it wasn't just standing behind me, it was aligned with me, copying my position, my height, my angle, like it was using me as a reference point. And I understood then that if I turned around, I wouldn't be facing something separate. I would be facing something already standing exactly where I was. And before I could think further, the lights inside the cabin flickered once, briefly, and in that split-second reflection on the glass, I saw it clearly for the first time, not in front of me, but behind me. Its face positioned right over my shoulder, same height, same posture, same stillness, but the expression didn't match, completely blank, eyes open wider than mine, fixed, not on the window, but on me. And when the lights came back fully, it was gone from the reflection, but the handprint was still there, on the inside of the glass, exactly where it had been. And I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because I knew it hadn't left. It had just stopped needing to be seen. Story 2. My name is Caleb, and it happened while I was driving through a snowstorm that wasn't supposed to be that heavy, and the forecast said light snow, but within minutes, the road was almost completely covered, and visibility dropped to the point where I could barely see past the headlights. And I remember gripping the wheel harder than usual because the tires kept slipping slightly every few seconds, not enough to lose control, but enough to remind me I shouldn't be out there. And there were no other cars. No lights behind me, nothing ahead. Just the road disappearing into white. And after maybe 15 minutes of driving like that, I noticed something in the rearview mirror. At first, I thought it was just distortion from the snow hitting the glass. But it stayed there, a dark shape in the back seat, not moving, just present. And I told myself it was a shadow. Maybe something I had thrown back there earlier, a jacket or a bag shifting with the motion of the car. And I didn't turn around because I didn't want to take my eyes off the road even for a second. But I kept checking the mirror, and every time I looked, it was still there. Same position, same height. And that was when I realized I hadn't put anything in the back seat that day. Nothing at all. And the shape wasn't slouched like an object. It was upright, like someone sitting properly. And I felt that pressure in my chest start to build because I knew there was no way anyone could have gotten into the car. I had locked it when I left. I hadn't stopped anywhere. And the doors hadn't opened since. And I remember reaching slowly toward the overhead light switch, thinking if I turned it on, I would see clearly what it was, and maybe it would disappear. Maybe it was just the angle, just the storm. And I pressed it, and for a split second, the interior lit up fully, and there was someone sitting directly behind me. Closer than a normal passenger would sit, leaning slightly forward, face partially hidden by shadow, but close enough that I could see the outline of eyes fixed on me through the mirror. And I hit the light off immediately without thinking, like turning it off would undo what I had just seen. And my hands tightened on the wheel because I felt the car drift slightly, and I corrected it quickly, heart already racing. And I didn't look back again for a few seconds, just focused on keeping the car straight. But then I felt it. Not movement in the seat, not a shift of weight, something closer. Like air moving just behind my head, like someone leaning in slowly. And I checked the mirror again, and the shape was gone from the back seat, completely gone. And for a moment, I felt relief hit me too fast, like my brain wanted to accept that it had never been there. But then I saw it again, not in the seat this time, but lower, closer to the center, like it was crouched between the seats, just out of full view, and I could see part of a face now, closer than before, angled upward, watching me from just behind the console. And I knew then it hadn't left, it had moved closer. And I felt my breathing change without realizing it, shorter, tighter. And I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop checking the mirror every few seconds, because I needed to know where it was. And every time I looked, it was slightly higher, slightly closer, like it was adjusting its position gradually, not in sudden movements, but in small increments I could barely track. And then I made the mistake of looking down for just a second to check the speed, because the road was getting worse. And when I looked back up, the rearview mirror was empty, completely empty. Nothing in the back seat, nothing between the seats, nothing at all. And that was worse, because now I didn't know where it was. And I felt that same shift again, but this time, not behind me, this time to my right, from the passenger side. And I turned my eyes slightly, without moving my head, and I saw it, just at the edge of my vision, something sitting in the passenger seat now, too still, too close, facing forward like it had always been there, and I didn't react. I forced myself not to, because I didn't know if it was responding to movement or attention, and I kept my eyes on the road, pretending nothing had changed, even though I could see part of it now clearly. A shoulder, a sleeve, dark, slightly damp, like it had come in from the snow. And then slowly, without turning its body, its head moved toward me, just enough that I could feel it looking directly at my face, and I could see it in the corner of my eye, closer than anyone should be sitting, leaning slightly toward me. And I kept driving because stopping didn't feel like an option anymore. And I reached slowly with my left hand toward the passenger door handle, thinking if I opened it, maybe it would react. Maybe it would leave. And the moment my fingers touched the handle, the locks clicked. Not just that door, but all of them. A sharp mechanical sound, and I froze, because I hadn't pressed the lock button. And I knew then I wasn't controlling the car anymore. Not completely. And I heard something then, very close to my ear. Not a voice, just a faint exhale, like breath, leaving slowly. And I kept my eyes forward, because I understood at that moment that if I turned my head even slightly, I would be face to face with it. No distance, no space, just right there. And the road ahead was almost gone under the snow now, just a faint outline. And I pressed the accelerator a little harder without thinking, like speed would solve something, like distance would matter. But then the headlights caught something in front of the car, and I reacted instantly, slamming the brakes. the car sliding slightly before stopping, and I stared ahead because, standing in the middle of the road, directly in front of the car, was a figure. Same height, same shape, same stillness, facing me. And I realized then that whatever was sitting next to me didn't need to be inside the car to be there with me. And I didn't look to the side. I didn't check the seat. Because I already knew that if I did, I would still see it sitting there, exactly where it had been, just turned slightly more toward me than before. Story 3. My name is Aaron, and it started after I left the gas station because I remember thinking I shouldn't keep driving in those conditions. But I didn't want to stay there either. The place was empty, no staff inside, just lights on and the door unlocked, and something about that didn't feel right. So I got back in the car and continued down the road, the snow already building up again, even though it had slowed for a few minutes. And the road ahead was narrow, surrounded by trees on both sides. No houses, no lights, nothing. Just a single lane cutting through the forest. And I kept driving for a while without seeing anything unusual until I noticed something in the distance, through the headlights, a shape on the road, too still to be an animal, too centered to be random. And I slowed down slightly, not stopping, just enough to see it more clearly as I got closer. And it looked like a person standing in the middle of the road, facing away from me, arms down at the sides, completely still. And I remember checking the mirrors quickly to see if there was anywhere to turn around. But the road behind me was already fading into white, no clear path, end quote. And the trees were too close to the sides to go off the road safely, so I kept moving forward slowly, expecting the person to react, to step aside, to turn, but they didn't move at all. And when I got closer, I noticed something that made me tighten my grip on the wheel. There were no footprints around them. The snow was smooth all the way up to where they were standing, and I slowed even more, almost stopping now, because I didn't understand how they had gotten there without leaving any trace. And I flashed the headlights slightly, a quick flick, trying to get a reaction. But nothing changed. They didn't move, didn't turn, didn't acknowledge the light at all. And I came to a full stop a few meters away, engine running, waiting for some kind of response. And when nothing happened, I reached for the horn and pressed it once, a short sound cutting through the silence. And that was when the figure moved, but not in the way I expected. Instead of stepping aside or turning naturally, it shifted forward slightly, like it had been pulled from the front rather than moving on its own. And then it stopped again, still facing away. And I felt something change in the atmosphere inside the car, like the air had tightened, like something was about to happen, but I didn't know what, and I made a decision I shouldn't have made. I opened the door just a little, not fully, just enough to call out, and the cold air hit immediately, sharp and quiet. And I said something like, "Hey, are you okay without raising my voice too much?" Because I didn't want to escalate anything. And the moment I spoke, the figure reacted again, this time more clearly. Its head tilting slightly to the side, but still not turning toward me, just adjusting in a way that didn't feel like a normal response. And I closed the door again slowly, locking it immediately. Because something about that movement didn't match how a person would react to being called. And I decided I was going to reverse, get out of there, even if it meant driving blind for a while. And I shifted into reverse carefully, eyes still on the figure. And as the car started to move backward, I saw something that made me stop immediately, another shape, further down the road behind the first one. Barely visible through the snow, but clearly there, standing in the same position, same stillness, facing the same direction. And I realized then that there wasn't just one. And I checked the mirrors again, quickly, and my chest tightened because I could see more shapes now behind me, further down the road I had just come from, spaced out but aligned, all standing in the same way, all facing toward me. And I stopped the car completely, because moving backward wasn't an option anymore. And I looked forward again, and the first figure had changed position slightly. Not closer, not further, just different, like it had adjusted without me seeing the movement. And I could feel that pressure building again. That sense that I was already too deep into something I didn't understand. And I stayed there for a few seconds, trying to think of what to do. And then, the first figure did something that made my decision for me. It stood up straighter, slowly, in a way that felt identical to something I had seen before, like a correction rather than a movement. And then its head began to turn, not all at once, but gradually, until it was facing directly toward the car, toward me. And even at that distance, I could tell the face wasn't reacting. No expression, no blinking, just fixed attention. And that was when I pressed the accelerator and drove forward, straight toward it, because stopping was no longer an option. And as I got closer, I expected it to move at the last second, to step aside, to react in any way, but it didn't. It stayed exactly where it was, and I passed through where it should have been standing, without feeling any impact. Nothing hitting the car, nothing on the windshield, just empty space. And I didn't slow down. I kept driving, heart pounding, eyes forward, and I checked the mirror, instinctively, and what I saw there made me understand. It hadn't stayed behind. The road behind me was now filled with those figures, no longer spaced out, no longer distant, but closer together. And all of them were facing the car, and they weren't standing still anymore. They were moving, not running, not walking, just shifting forward in that same unnatural way, closing the distance without clear steps. And I pressed harder on the accelerator because I could feel something was getting closer, not outside, but inside the car. The same pressure I had felt before, but stronger now. And I didn't look away from the road until I felt something touch the back of my seat, lightly. Just a brief contact. And I froze for a fraction of a second, before forcing myself to keep driving. And then it happened again, this time on the side of my shoulder, a light pressure, like someone testing the distance. And I understood then that whatever those figures were, they didn't need to catch the car to reach me. And the last thing I saw before the road disappeared completely under the snow was my own reflection in the windshield. And just behind it, slightly out of sync with my movements, another face turning toward me, a fraction of a second, too late.